Let's talk about Turkmenistan. If you just look at the surface, you see this land of vast deserts, cities gleaming with white marble, and enormous golden statues. But, just behind that shimmer, there's a really dark reality: hunger, fear, and one of the most oppressive dictatorships on the entire planet. And that right there is the central paradox, the big question we're digging into. Turkmenistan is sitting on what's estimated to be the world's fourth largest natural gas reserves. We're talking enough gas to power entire continents for years and years. Logically, its people should be living like citizens in Kuwait or Qatar, but they're not even close. So how on earth did a country with such incredible wealth end up in such a dire state? This is the huge disconnect. The government pushes this image of wealth and prosperity, all these shiny white marble buildings in the capital city. But for the average person, reality is a world away. It's a daily grind, a struggle with food shortages, crazy hyperinflation, and just this constant nagging state of fear. To really understand how this happened, we've got to look past that marble facade and dig into the country's history. And that story really starts with its time as a kind of forgotten corner of the Soviet Empire. So for centuries, this was a major crossroads on the old Silk Road. But then, in the 1920s, it got swallowed up by the Soviet Union. And for the next 70 years, its purpose was pretty simple: just supply Moscow with gas and cotton. So when the USSR finally collapsed in 1991, you might expect a revolution, right? Nope. The very same communist officials who ran the place for Moscow just stayed in power. They swapped out the flag and called it independence. And what came next wasn't freedom. It was the rise of this incredibly bizarre and absolute dictatorship, one shaped by two men who built these massive, almost cartoonish cults of personality around themselves. The first guy was Murat Niyazov. He was a former communist official who basically just declared himself president for life, and he gave himself this grand title, Turkmenbashi, which means leader of all Turkmen. His face was everywhere, on the money, on billboards, you name it. And the level of absurdity here is just staggering. He wrote a book, the Runama, and forced everyone to read it. It was required for schools, for driving tests, for government jobs. He actually claimed that reading it 3 times would guarantee you a spot in heaven. He renamed the months of the year after himself and his mom, banned opera and beards, and get this, built a massive golden statue of himself that literally rotated with the sun. So when Niyazov died in 2006, you can imagine there was this little spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things would change. But that hope got snuffed out really fast. His replacement? You're not going to believe this. His personal dentist, a guy named Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov. He promised reforms, but it didn't take long for him to create his own personality cult. He started calling himself Arkadog, or the Protector, and state TV would show him as this action hero type. And while his people were standing in lines for bread, he spent millions on a 50-foot-tall golden statue of his favorite dog. Yes, a dog. After 15 years of this, the personality cult became a full-on dynasty. Berdimuhamedov announced he was retiring, but come on, it wasn't a retirement, it was a handover. The law was oh so conveniently changed to lower the minimum age for president. And right on cue, his 40-year-old son, Serdar, won a totally non-competitive election. This wasn't democracy, it was an inheritance. So, while these rulers are busy building golden statues and passing power down like a family heirloom, what is the real human cost? What's it like for the people actually living under their thumb? Well, according to Freedom House, a watchdog group that tracks this stuff, Turkmenistan gets a global freedom score of just 1. 1 out of 100. It's truly one of the most closed-off and repressive societies on the entire planet. And that score, it's not just some abstract number. It means no free press. It means having the world's slowest internet, social media, blocked, phone calls, monitored, foreign journalists are banned, and regular citizens can't just leave the country. People live in fear, speaking in whispers because they are terrified that one wrong word could land them in prison. And here's the really tragic part. Despite all that gas wealth, the United Nations reports that 800,000 people are facing severe food insecurity. That's the highest rate in all of Central Asia. You have people lining up for hours in the baking sun just to buy their ration of bread, flour, and cooking oil. So, all of this brings us right back to our original question. How does a regime that is this brutal, this incompetent, possibly survive in the 21st century? Well, the answer is literally right there, under their feet. The regime's entire lifeline is a pretty simple economic loop with China. Okay, so Turkmenistan has the gas. China gives them billions in loans to build the pipelines to get it out. Then, Turkmenistan exports almost all of that gas to China to pay off its massive debt. This whole setup gives China huge leverage and, maybe most importantly, shields the regime from any real international pressure over its human rights record. Every single year, Turkmenistan makes billions of dollars from these gas exports. So, if the people are suffering so much, where is all that money going? Well, it's definitely not going to schools or hospitals. Transparency International ranks Turkmenistan 165th out of 180 countries on its corruption index. That's near the very bottom. That gas money, it just disappears into offshore accounts, funding the insane lifestyles of the ruling family and their friends. And the regime is also pretty clever. Geopolitically speaking, by declaring permanent neutrality, it promises not to join any military alliances. It uses this status to place superpowers like China and Russia against each other, making sure that no single foreign country gets enough influence to threaten their grip on power. So when you put it all together, what you're left with is a calculated tragedy. Turkmenistan really is a profound and frankly scary cautionary tale for the modern world. The poverty here, you see, it's not an accident. It's a feature of the system. You could call it planned poverty. The regime intentionally keeps the population weak and dependent because a population that's just focused on daily survival doesn't have the time or the energy to demand political change. And that right there is the ultimate tragedy. With all of its resources, Turkmenistan could have been the next Dubai, a true beacon of prosperity in Central Asia. Instead, it became a textbook example of the resource curse. Absolute proof that immense natural wealth can actually destroy a nation when it's controlled by a greedy few. For decades, the social contract here has been brutally simple. Stay silent, and you'll be allowed to survive. That's why you don't see protests, why you don't see dissent. There's just this heavy, suffocating quiet that happens when people have lost all hope that things could ever get better. And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Yeah, there's a kind of peace in Turkmenistan, but it's the peace of a prison yard, not the peace of a thriving society. And it forces us to ask, what is the true cost when a nation's silence is mistaken for peace?